This is The Law of Attraction in the World of Thought by Walker Atkinson. Introduction. The universe is governed by a law, a very important law. Its manifestations are manifold, but viewed from a fundamental standpoint, it is clear that there is only one law. We know some of its manifestations, but we remain ignorant of the rest. Yet, every day, we learn a little more about them. The veil is gradually lifting. We intellectually discuss the law of gravitation, but we are unaware that it is also a marvelous manifestation of the law of attraction. We are familiar with this wonderful manifestation of the law that attracts and holds together the atoms of which matter is composed. We recognize the power of the law that draws bodies toward the earth, which keeps planets in place, but we turn a blind eye to the powerful law that attracts to us what we desire or fear, that which creates or ruins our lives. When we become aware that thought is a force, a manifestation of energy endowed with the magnetic power of attraction, we begin to understand why many things were previously unknown to us. No study rewards the student more for invested time than the study of how this powerful law of the world of thought operates, the law of attraction. When we think, we emit vibrations of a fine and ethereal substance that are as real as the vibrations manifesting light, heat, electricity, and magnetism. The fact that these vibrations are not evident to our five senses does not mean they do not exist. A powerful magnet will send vibrations and exert a force sufficient to attract towards it a 100-kilogram piece of steel, but we cannot see, taste, smell, or hear this force in the same way. Similarly, thought vibrations cannot be seen, tasted, felt, or heard in an ordinary manner. Though it is true that there are documented cases of individuals particularly sensitive to psychics' impressions who have perceived powerful thought waves, and many of you can testify to having clearly felt the vibrations of others' thoughts, whether in the presence of the sender or at a distance. Telepathy and its associated phenomena are not nonsense. Light and heat manifest through vibrations much less intense than those of thought, but the difference lies only in vibratory rate. Scientific records shed some light on this matter. Elisa Gray asserts in her book, The Markings of Nature, that there is much speculation about the existence of sound waves that the human ear cannot capture, and colored light waves that the eye cannot perceive. The vast dark and silent space existing between 40,000 and 400 trillion vibrations per second, and the infinite beyond the 700 vibrations per second, where light ceases in the realm of motion, allow for all sorts of speculations. M. Williams states in his work titled Chapters from George's Science that there is no graduation between the fastest ripples or tremors produced by our sensation of sound and the slowest of them that give rise to our most delicate sensations of heat. There is a vast gap between them, large enough to include another realm of movement, occupying a space between our auditory world and our world of heat and light. And there is no valid reason to suppose that matter is incapable of an intermediate activity of this kind, or to imagine that this activity cannot give rise to other sensations, provided there are organs capable of capturing and feeling their movements. I quote these authorities solely to provide ideas for reflection, not intending to prove the existence of thought vibrations. This last fact has been fully demonstrated to the satisfaction of many researchers in this field, and a little reflection will show you that it agrees with your own experiences. Often we hear the well-known statement in mental science that thoughts are things, and we utter these words without truly understanding what they mean. If we fully understood the truth of this assertion and the natural consequences supporting it, we could comprehend many things that currently seem obscure to us, and use the wonderful energy of the power of thought in the same way as we use any other energetic manifestation. As I've already said, when we think, we set in motion vibrations of a very high level, as real as the vibrations of light, heat, sound, and electricity. And when we understand the laws that govern the production and transmission of these vibrations, we can use them in our daily lives, just as we do with other forms of energy that we cannot see, hear, weigh, or measure. The inability to detect these vibrations does not prove they do not exist. There are sound waves that no one can hear, although some are undoubtedly captured by the ear of certain insects. and others are detected by very sensitive instruments, invented by humans. However, there is a huge gap between the sounds recorded by the most sensitive instruments and the limit that the human mind, reasoning by analogy, considers the dividing line between sound waves and other forms of vibrations. There are light waves that the human eye does not perceive, some of which can be captured by more sensitive instruments and others much subtler, that still cannot be detected due to the lack of appropriate instruments. Although progress is made every year and the unexplored realm gradually diminishes, the invention of new instruments reveals vibrations hitherto unknown. Yet, these vibrations were as real before the invention of the instrument as after. Suppose we lack instruments to record magnetism. Then one might be inclined to deny the existence of this powerful energy because it could not be proven, felt, sensed, heard, seen, embraced, or measured. However, the magnet continues to send waves of sufficient force to attract pieces of metal weighing hundreds of kilograms. Each form of vibration requires its own type of instrument to record it. Currently, the human brain seems to be the only instrument capable of recording thought waves, although occultists believe that scientists will soon invent devices sensitive enough to collect and record this type of impressions. Based on the information available to us at present, it seems that this invention is imminent. But those who have experimented in the field of practical telepathy do not need more evidence than the results of their own experiences. We continuously send thoughts of varying intensity, reaping their results. Our thought waves not only influence us and others, but they possess an attracting power. They draw towards us foreign thoughts, things, circumstances, people, and luck, based on the dominant character of the thought in our minds. Thoughts of love will attract to us the love of others, circumstances, and environment according to that thought, as well as people with similar thoughts. Thoughts of anger, hatred, envy, malice, and jealousy will attract to us similar thoughts from other minds, as well as circumstances in which we will be compelled to manifest those vile thoughts, and also receive them from other individuals who manifest disharmony and others. An intense or prolonged thought will make us the center of attraction for corresponding thought waves from other individuals. In the world of thought, analogues attract, and we reap what we sow in the world of thought. Birds of similar plumage flock together. Curses return home like birds, accompanied by friends resembling them. The love-filled human perceives love everywhere and attracts the love of others. The hate-filled human receives all the hate they can bear. One who thinks of fighting often has to battle against everything possible until they triumph, and so on with everyone. Each receives what they ask for through the wireless telegraphy of the mind. One who wakes up in a bad mood tends to make the whole family moody, even before breakfast ends. The irritable woman generally deals throughout the day with everything that can feed her irritability claim. This question of thought attraction is a serious subject. When one seriously contemplates it, they realize that a person creates their own circumstances, even if they blame others. I have known people who understood this law and maintain a calm and positive thought without being affected in any way by the disharmony around them. These individuals are like vessels in which oil is poured into troubled waters. They remain serene and calm as the storm rages around them. When one has understood how this law operates, they are not at the mercy of capricious thought storms. We have passed through the era of physical strength to enter into that of intellectual supremacy, and now we are stepping into an almost unknown domain, that of psychic energy. This domain has its own laws, and we must acquaint ourselves with them or they will surpass us, just as it happens to those who disregard the plans of effort. I will attempt to clarify for you the underlying important principles of this new field of energy unfolding before us, so that you may harness this great energy and apply it for legitimate and worthy purposes, much as mankind employs steam, electricity, and other forms of energy today. Chapter 1. Thought waves and their reproduction process. Thought produces waves that propagate through the vast ocean of thought, much like a stone thrown into water. However, there is a distinction. The waves on water move in all directions but within a single plane, whereas thought waves move in all directions from a common center, akin to the rays of the sun. Just as we are enveloped by a great expanse of air here on Earth, we are likewise surrounded by a vast mental ether. Our thought waves travel through this expansive mental ether, radiating in all directions, diminishing in intensity with distance due to friction, upon contact with the grand mental body that encompasses us from all sides. These thought waves possess other distinct qualities from waves on water. They have the ability to self-reproduce. In this regard, they resemble more the sound waves than waves on water. Similar to how a violin note can resonate and make a very fine crystal sing, an intense thought tends to stir similar vibrations in minds attuned to receiving them. Many of the erratic thoughts that reach us are mere echoes of vibrations in response to certain intense thoughts sent by another person. However, unless our minds are attuned to receive them, it is unlikely that these thoughts will affect us. If we hold lofty and significant thoughts, our minds acquire a certain tone corresponding to the character of the thoughts we have entertained. Once this tone is established, we will be able to pick up vibrations from other minds attuned to the same thought. Conversely, if we accustom ourselves to maintain thoughts of an opposing character, we will soon reflect the tone of thoughts emitted by the thousands of people thinking similar things. We are largely what we have thought, and the balance is represented by the character of suggestions and thoughts from others that have reached us, whether directly through their words or telepathically through these thought waves. However, our general mental attitude determines the character of the thought waves received from others. Similar to thoughts emanating from ourselves, we only receive thoughts that are in harmony with the general mental attitude we maintain. Those that are not in harmony affect us very little because they evoke no response within us. One who firmly believes in themselves and maintains an intense and positive mental attitude of confidence and determination will probably not be affected by adverse and negative thoughts of discouragement and failure emanating from the minds of others where these predominate. Meanwhile, these negative thoughts will reach someone whose mental attitude is tuned to a low tone, thereby deepening their negative state and adding fuel to the fire consuming their energy. Or if you prefer another analogy, they will serve to fuel the fire of their energy and activity. We attract foreign thoughts of the same kind. One who thinks of success will be in harmony with the minds of other individuals thinking similarly, and they will help each other just as they will help them. One who constantly keeps their mind immersed in thoughts of failure comes closer to the minds of others who have failed, and each tends to drag the other down. One who thinks everything is bad is likely to see much evil and will come into contact with other individuals, seemingly proving their theory. And one who seeks good in everything and everyone is probably prone to attract things and people corresponding to that way of thinking. In general, we see what we seek. You can develop this idea more clearly by thinking of radios that only receive vibrations from the station tuned to the same wavelength, while other signals pass through the air very close without affecting the receiver. The same law can be applied to thought operations. We only receive what corresponds to our mental agreement. If we feel discouraged, we can be certain that we have adopted a negative tone, and not only will we be affected by our own thoughts, but we will also receive other equally depressing thoughts constantly emitted by the minds of other unhappy individuals. If ever we reach heights of enthusiasm and energy, we will soon feel the arrival of encouraging, bold, energetic, and positive thoughts emitted by men and women of the world. We can recognize these circumstances without much effort when we come into personal contact with people and feel their depressing or stimulating vibrations, as the case may be. Even when we are not in their presence, the same law operates, though less intensely. The mind has many tones, from the highest positive note to the lowest negative note, with many other intermediate notes varying in their respective distance from the positive or negative end. When your mind operates in positive terms, you feel strong, alive, bright, content, happy, confident, and courageous. You can perform your work well, achieve your intentions, and progress towards success, emitting intense and positive thoughts that affect others, prompting them to cooperate with you or follow your leadership, depending on their own mental tone. When you touch the negative end of the mental keyboard, you feel depressed, weak, passive, confused, fearful, and cowardly. You find yourself unable to progress or succeed. your effect on others is practically nil, and you are led by them. Instead of leading them, the most positive individuals treat you like a rag. In some individuals, the positive element seems to predominate, while in others, the tendency is negative. This may seem more evident, but of course the degrees of positivity and negativity vary greatly. What may appear negative to A may be perceived as positive by C. When two individuals meet, there is usually a silent mental conflict where their respective minds check their quality of positivity and establish their relative position between them. This process may be unconscious in many cases, but it is something that occurs. The adjustment is generally automatic, but sometimes the struggle is so intense that the issue penetrates the consciousness of both individuals. Sometimes, both parties are so similar in their degree of positivity that they fail to mentally tune, they cannot agree and push each other away or remain together in constant disputes and discussions. We are either positive or negative to everyone with whom we establish contact. We may be positive towards our children, employees, and dependents, but at the same time, we may be perceived as negative to other individuals for whom we hold lower positions or whom we have allowed to dominate over us. Of course, something might occur, and suddenly we become more positive than the man or woman for whom we were negative until now. Cases of this type are quite frequent, and as knowledge of these mental laws becomes more widespread, we will witness more instances of individuals asserting themselves using their newly discovered energy. But remember that you possess the power to raise the tone of your mind to achieve a positive outlook through the force of will. And indeed, it's also true that you can fall into a low and negative tone due to negligence or weak will. There are more people in the negative thought plane than in the positive, and that's why there are more negative thought vibrations in our mental atmosphere. Fortunately for us, this is offset by the fact that a positive thought is infinitely more powerful than a negative one. If, through the force of will, we raise our mental tone to a higher level, we can close the door to depressing thoughts and accept vibrations that correspond to our new mental attitude. This is one of the secrets of affirmations and autosuggestions used by various schools of positive thinking and other approaches to the new mode of thought. Affirmations themselves lack merit, but they serve a dual purpose. Firstly, they tend to establish new mental attitudes within us and are excellent for character development and the science of self-transformation. Secondly, they tend to raise the mental tone so that we can benefit from positive thought waves from others on the same thought plane, whether we believe in them or not. We are always making affirmations. One who affirms the ability to do something and says it with conviction develops within themselves the qualities that facilitate its achievement, while also aligning their mind with the appropriate tone to receive thought waves that could assist in reaching that goal. On the other hand, one who says and feels they will fail will only block and stifle thoughts coming from their own subconscious that aim to help, thus aligning with the thought of failure in the world. And I assure you, this is very widespread at present. We must not let ourselves be affected by the adverse and negative thoughts of those around us. We must ascend to the upper chambers of our mental dwelling and adjust our tone to a higher frequency than the vibrations of lower thought planes. Then not only will you be immune to their negative vibrations, but you will also come into contact with the significant body of intense positive thought emitted by those who are on the same developmental plane as you. My goal will be to guide and instruct you in the proper use of thought and willpower so that you can wield them correctly and be able to strike the positive note whenever needed. It's not about hitting the highest note on all occasions, but rather maintaining a comfortable tone effortlessly and having the means to elevate that tone when the opportunity arises. With this knowledge, you will not be at the mercy of the mind's old automatic action, but it will be your mind under your control. The development of willpower is much like the development of a muscle. It's a matter of practice and gradual improvement. At first, feeling tired is normal, but with each new effort, strength is gained until this newfound strength becomes real and permanent. Many of us have become positive by finding ourselves in extraordinary or urgent situations. We're accustomed to drawing from our resources when necessary, But through intelligent practice, willpower will strengthen in such a way that your habitual state will be equivalent to your current strength. Then, when you feel the need to apply reinforcement, you will attain a position that you cannot even imagine currently. Don't believe that I advocate being constantly under high tension. It's not desirable, not only because it's tiring, but also because at times it's necessary to release attention and become receptive to absorb impressions. It's necessary to relax and adopt a certain degree of receptivity, knowing that it's always possible to regain composure and adopt a more assertive state as needed. A highly assertive person loses a lot of pleasure and leisure, while by being assertive, you express yourself, and by being receptive, you accept impressions. By being assertive, you're a teacher, whereas by being receptive, you become the student. It's not only good to be a good teacher, but also important to know how to be a good listener. Chapter 2. Discussion on the mind. Human beings have only one mind, but they possess numerous mental faculties, and each of them is capable of functioning in two different directions of mental effort. There are no clear boundaries that separate the different functions of a faculty, but they overlap like the colors of the spectrum. An active force of any mental faculty is the result of a direct impulse transmitted at the moment of effort. A passive effort of any mental faculty is the result of an active effort from the same mental faculty or an active effort from another mental faculty, following a suggestion from thought vibrations of another person or thought impulses, from an ancestor transmitted by the laws of heredity, including impulses transmitted from generation to generation, since the times of the original vibratory, impulse transmitted by the first cause, whose impulses unfold and develop. When an appropriate state of evolutionary development is reached, active effort is a newborn, fresh and recent, while passive effort is less recent and actually results from vibratory impulses transmitted in past eras. Active effort forges ahead by clearing the branches that obstruct its path and the stones that lie in its way. Passive effort follows beaten paths. A thought impulse or movement caused initially by an active effort or faculty can become strictly automatic through repetition or habit, gathering momentum from the impulse developed by repeated active effort, pushing it forward passively until stopped by another active effort or changing direction for the same reason. Furthermore, thought impulses or movement impulses following passive terms can be completed or corrected by active effort. The active function creates, changes, or destroys the passive function. It continues the work initiated by the active function and obeys orders and suggestions. The active function produces the thought or movement pattern to which it transmits its vibrations, which are then propelled passively. The active function also has the power to emit vibrations that neutralize the impulse of the thought or movement pattern. It can also launch a new thought or movement pattern with more intense vibrations that surpass and absorb the initial thought or movement, replacing it with something new. Once their missions begin, all thought impulses or movement impulses continue to vibrate passively until corrected or completed by subsequent impulses transmitted by the active function or another controlling power. The continuity of the initial impulse gives it momentum and strength, making its correction or termination more difficult. This explains what is called the force of habit or custom. Those who have made efforts to overcome an acquired habit will better understand this law. It can apply to both good and bad habits. The inherent morality derived from this is evident. Sometimes several mental faculties combine to produce a single manifestation. A task to be accomplished may require the combined exercise of various faculties, some of which may manifest through active effort and others through passive effort. The emergence of new circumstances or problems requires the exercise of active effort, while a familiar problem or task can be easily handled by passive effort without the aid of its more dynamic sibling. In nature, there is an instinctive tendency in living organisms to perform certain actions, the tendency of an organized body to seek what satisfies its desires. This tendency is sometimes called appetence. In reality, it's a passive mental impulse originating from the impulse given by the first cause and transmitted throughout evolutionary development, accumulating strength and energy as the impulse from the first cause is reinforced by the powerful attraction exerted by the Absolute. This tendency is easily observable in the plant kingdom, with minor manifestations in the lowest types and more significant ones in the highest types. It is generally referred to as the vital force in plants. However, it is a manifestation of rudimentary intelligence that operates through passive effort. In some of the highest forms of plant life, there is a slight indication of independent vital action, a faint indication of choice and will. Authors studying plant life have described remarkable examples of this phenomenon. Undoubtedly, it's a demonstration of rudimentary active intelligence. In the lower animal kingdom, there exists a high degree of passive mental effort, varying among different families and species. A considerable amount of active intelligence is also apparent. It's undeniable that the lower animal possesses reason, albeit to a lesser extent than the human being. In fact, the demonstration of voluntary intelligence exhibited by an intelligent animal is often as high as that shown by lower types of human beings or by a young child. Just as a child before and after birth shows in its body the stages of physical development of man, it also manifests before and after birth and until maturity the stages of man's mental development. The human being, the highest life form produced so far on this planet, demonstrates possessing the highest form of passive intelligence and a much higher development of active intelligence than what can be observed in lower animals. Nevertheless, the degrees of this power vary widely among different human races, and varying degrees of active intelligence are evident among individuals of the same race. These degrees depend in no way upon the amount of culture, social position, or educational advantages the individual possesses. Mental culture and mental development are two very different things. Just look around us to become aware of the different stages of active intelligence development in human beings. The reason of many human beings is little more than passive intellection, demonstrating limited qualities of voluntary thought. They prefer to let others think for them. Active intellection tires them, and the passive, instinctive, and automatic mental process is much easier for them. Their minds operate by following paths of least resistance. They are hardly more than human sheep. In lower animals and inferior human types, active intellection is mainly confined to the grossest faculties, to the most material plane. The higher mental faculties operate according to instinctive and automatic patterns of passive function. With the progress of lower life forms on the evolutionary scale, they have developed new faculties that were latent within them. These faculties always manifested as rudimentary passive functioning, then developed higher passive forms before coming into action with active functions. The evolutionary process continues with an invariable tendency toward the development of high active intelligence. This evolutionary progress is caused by the vibratory impulse given by the first cause, aided by the upward attraction of the absolute. The law of evolution follows its course, and the human being begins to develop new mental powers, which, of course, first manifest in the domain of passive effort. Some individuals have developed these new faculties to a considerable degree, and it is possible that a short time may pass before the human being can exercise them according to the principles of their active functions. In fact, this power has already been realized by a few. It is the secret of Eastern occultists and some of their Western brethren. The docility of the mind towards will can be increased through appropriately directed practice. What we call strengthening the will is, in reality, training the mind to recognize and absorb inner power. The will is strong enough and does not need to be strengthened, but the mind must be trained to receive and act upon the suggestions of the will. The will is the external manifestation of the I Am. The flow of will proceeds with all its power through the spiritual wiring, but you must learn how to raise the pantograph to touch this wiring before the mental trolley can be set in motion. This is a different idea from that generally received from writers who speak of willpower, but it is correct, as you will convince yourself by carrying out the appropriate experiments in the right way. The attraction of the absolute urges the human being upward, and the vibratory force of the first impulse is not yet exhausted. The time has come in evolutionary development where the human being can help themselves. One who understands the law can achieve wonders through the development of mental powers. One who turns away from the truth will suffer from their lack of knowledge of the law. One who understands the laws of their mental being, develops their latent powers and uses them intelligently. One who does not despise their passive mental functions, but also uses them, loads these functions with tasks for which they are better suited and can achieve wonderful results from their work, provided they have mastered and trained them to rise toward the higher self. When they fail to perform their task adequately, the human regulates them. Their knowledge prevents them from needlessly interfering with them, avoiding harm. They develop the faculties and latent powers within them and learn how to manifest them in both active and passive intellection. They know that the true human being inside themselves is the master, and that the active and passive functions are only tools. They have banished fear from themselves and enjoy freedom. They have found themselves. They have realized the secret of I am. Chapter 3. Building the Mind. The human being can build their mind and make it whatever they want. In fact, we are constantly building the mind at every moment of our lives, consciously or unconsciously. Most of us do it unconsciously, but those who can see a little below the surface of things take charge and become conscious creators of their own mentality. They are no longer subject to suggestions and influences from others. Now they are masters of themselves. They assert the self and impose obedience on subordinate mental faculties. The self is the ruler of the mind, and what we call will is the instrument of the self. Behind all this there is something more, of course, and the universal will is higher than the individual will, although the latter maintains a much closer contact than is generally supposed with the universal will. When the lower self is conquered and the self is asserted, a very close contact with the universal will is established, participating in its wonderful power. When the self is asserted and one finds oneself, an intimate connection between individual will and universal will is established, but before a person can use the enormous energy made available to them, they must succeed in mastering the lower self. Think of the absurdity of the human being proclaiming that they manifest powers when in reality they are slaves to the lower parts of their mental being that must be subordinated. Think of a human being enslaved by their moods, passions, animal appetites and lower faculties, all the while trying to proclaim the benefits of will. I am not preaching asceticism, which seems to me a confession of weakness. I am speaking of self-control, of reaffirming the self over the subordinate parts of oneself. From a higher standpoint, this self is the only real being, and the rest is inconsequential. But the space I have does not allow me to address this issue, which is why I will use the term being to refer to the human being as a whole. Before a human being can completely reaffirm the self, they must gain absolute control of the subordinate parts of their being. All things are beneficial when we learn to master them, but there is nothing good when they dominate us. As long as we allow the lower parts of our being to give us orders, we will remain their slaves. It is only when the self ascends the throne and wields the scepter that order is established, and things take a proper relationship among themselves. I am not saying there is anything wrong with those who are dominated by their lower selves. They are at a lower level of evolution and will rise in due time. What I am doing is drawing the attention of those who are already prepared to the fact that the sovereign must reassert their will, and the subjects must obey. There are orders to be given and executed. Rebellion must be crushed and competent authority restored, and the time to do so is now. You have let your rebellious subjects keep the king away from his throne. You have allowed the mental kingdom to suffer from the anarchy of irresponsible faculties. You have been slaves to appetite, unworthy thoughts, passions, and negativity. The will has been set aside and the lower desire has usurped the throne. It is time to restore order in the mental kingdom. You are capable of reaffirming your control over every emotion, appetite, passion, or thought through the reassertion of the will. You can command fear to retreat, jealousy to leave your presence, hate to disappear from your life, anger to hide, worries to cease tormenting you. You can make unchecked appetite and passion submit and become humble servants rather than masters, all through the reassertion of the self. Similarly, you can now surround yourself with the glorious company of courage, love, and self-discipline. You can crush rebellion and restore peace and order in your mental kingdom as soon as you express the order and insist on its execution. Before becoming an empire, you must establish the proper internal conditions. You must demonstrate your ability to govern your own kingdom. The first battle is the conquest of the lower self by the true self. Affirm, "I reaffirm control of my true self." Repeat these words fervently and positively throughout the day, at least once every hour, especially when faced with conditions that tempt you to act according to the dictates of the lower self, rather than the indications transmitted by the true self. In times of doubt and indecision, speak these words fervently, and the path ahead will be clarified for you. Repeat them several times before going to bed, but make sure to support them with the inspiring thought, not just repeating them like a parrot. From the mental image of the true self reasserting control over the lower planes of your own mind, imagine the king on his throne. You will become aware of an influx of new thoughts, and things that seemed difficult to you before will become much easier. You will feel that you have control in your hands and that you are the master, not the slave. The thought you maintain will manifest in action, and you will grow to become what you have in mind. Practice firmly focusing your mind on the higher self, and draw inspiration from it when you feel tempted to yield to the enticements of the lower part of your nature. When you feel inclined to lose your calm, reaffirm the self, and the tone of your voice will diminish. Anger is unworthy of the developed being. When you feel shaken and upset, remember what you are and rise above the sensation. When you feel fear, remember that the true being fears nothing and reaffirm courage. When you feel prompted to jealousy, think of your higher nature and laugh. This is how you must reassert the true self and not allow the elements of the lower plane of mentality to disturb you. They are unworthy of you, and their place must be shown to them. Do not allow these things to dominate you. They must be your subjects, not your masters. You must withdraw from this plane, and the only way to do that is to withdraw from these phases of thought that only shape things to fit their desires. Perhaps, at first, this will seem difficult, but persevere, and you will gain that satisfaction. That comes only when one conquers the lower parts of our nature. You have been a slave for long enough. Now is the time to free yourself. If you faithfully follow these exercises by the end of the year, you will be a different being, and you will look back with a compassionate smile on your old state, but it requires some effort. This is not a task for children, but for enthusiastic men and women. Make an effort. Chapter 4. The Secret of Will. While psychologists may differ in their theories about the nature of will, none deny its existence or question its power. Everyone recognizes the power of a strong will. Everyone knows it can be used to overcome the greatest obstacles. But few realize that will is something that can be developed and strengthened through intelligent practice. They believe they can accomplish wonders with a strong will, but instead of seeking to develop it, they settle for vain regrets, sighing without doing anything. Those who have deeply studied the subject know that the force of will, with all its latent possibilities and great powers, can be developed, disciplined, mastered, and directed, just like any other force of nature. No matter which theory you want to adopt about the nature of will, as long as you practice intelligently, you will achieve results. Personally, I support a somewhat strange theory about will. I believe that every human being potentially has a strong will, and that all they need to do is train their mind to be able to use it. I am convinced that within the highest regions of every human being's mind lies a great reservoir of willpower waiting to be used. The current of will flows along psychic wiring, and all that needs to be done is to raise the mental trolley for the energy to descend and be used. The supply is limitless because the battery is connected to the great powerhouse of universal willpower, whose energy is inexhaustible. Your will does not need training, but your mind does. The mind is the instrument, and the supply of willpower is proportional to the excellence of the instrument through which it manifests. It is not necessary to accept this theory if you do not like it. This lesson will fit into your theory as well as mine. One who develops their mind so that the force of will can be transmitted through it will have wonderful possibilities open before them. Not only will they have found a great power within their reach, but they will be able to use faculties, talents, and abilities whose existence they did not even imagine. This secret of will is the magical key that opens all doors. Donald Michel once wrote, "Resolution is what manifests a man, but not weak resolution, but bold determination, not erratic purposes. It is this strong and untiring will that overcomes difficulties and dangers, just as a child advances through the frozen lands of winter, lighting up their eyes and brain with a proud beating heart, moving toward the insurmountable. Will transforms men into giants." Many of us feel that if we could exercise our will, we could accomplish wonders, but for some reason, it seems that we do not want to make the necessary effort, that we do not reach the real turning point, that we delay it again and again. We vaguely talk about the fact that something will happen someday, but that day is slow to come. We instinctively feel the power of will, but we lack the necessary energy to exert it, which is why we go with the flow. Unless a difficulty arises, unless a useful obstacle stands in our way, unless a kind pain pushes us into action. In these cases, we are forced to reaffirm our will, and that's how we begin to get results. The problem is that we don't want anything to force us to exercise our willpower. We don't want to bother. We are mentally lazy and weak in desire. If you don't like the word desire, replace it with aspiration. Some people call the lower impulses desires and the higher ones aspirations. It's a matter of words, so choose the one you prefer. That's where the problem lies. Leave a person in danger of losing their life or a woman about to lose great love, and you'll witness a surprising display of willpower coming from an unexpected source. Let a woman's son be threatened by danger, and you'll see how she exhibits a degree of courage and willpower that sweeps everything before her. And yet, that same woman, moaning before a dominating husband, will lack the will to perform a simple task. A boy will do all sorts of tasks if he considers them a game, but he can hardly force himself to chop wood. Strong will follows the trail of intense desire. If you really want to do something, you will generally have to develop the willpower to achieve it. The problem lies in the fact that you don't really want any of this, and yet you blame your lack of will. You say you want to do it, but if you took the time to think about it, you'd see that you actually want to do something else. You're not ready to pay the price to get there. Stop for a moment and analyze this statement and apply it to your own case. You are mentally lazy. That's the problem. Don't talk to me about lacking sufficient willpower. You have a large reservoir of will waiting to be used, but you are too lazy to do it. Now, if this question really interests you, get to work. First, find out what you really want to do, then start working and do it. Don't worry about willpower. You will have as much as you need. The question is getting to that point where you decide to do it. That's the real test, resolution. Think about it for a bit and decide if you really want to be a person with enough willpower to get to work. Many essays and excellent books have been written on this subject, and they all agree on recognizing the greatness of willpower, using the most enthusiastic terms. But few have said anything about how those who do not possess it or who possess it, but to a limited degree, can acquire this strength. Some have proposed exercises to strengthen willpower, but in reality, they strengthen the mind so that it can draw from its energy warehouse. But in general, they have overlooked the fact that it is in autosuggestion that the secret of developing the mind into an efficient instrument of will lies. Using my willpower, repeat these words several times with conviction and positivity immediately after finishing this section. Then, repeat them often throughout the day, at least once every hour, especially when you are faced with something that requires you to exert your willpower. Also, repeat them several times once you go to bed to sleep, but these words will mean nothing unless you support them with thought. In fact, thought is everything, and words are just pincers to which thought is attached, so think about what you're saying and be aware of what you're saying. At first, you will have to have faith and use the words with a confident expectation of the result. Keep in mind the thought you're forming in the warehouse of willpower, and before long, you will find that this thought takes shape in action, and your willpower will manifest. You will feel a wave of energy every time you repeat these words. You will see yourself overcoming difficulties and bad habits, and you will be surprised at how easily everything that comes from you manifests. Exercise. Accomplish at least one unpleasant task per day for a month. If something particularly displeases you and you would like to avoid it, that's precisely the one you will accomplish. It's not about sacrificing yourself or pushing yourself, but exercising your willpower. Everyone can do something they love joyfully, but joyfully exercising what displeases us requires willpower, and that's how you must complete the task. You will see how valuable a discipline it is. Try it for a month and you will see how far you can go. If you avoid this exercise, it is better to admit that you don't want willpower, that you are content to stay where you are and remain weak. Chapter 5. How to immunize yourself against the attraction of harmful thoughts. The first thing to do is to eliminate fear and worry. Fearful thinking is the cause of much misery and failure. I know you have heard this many times before, but it is worth repeating. Fear is a mental habit learned through negative thinking. Great expectations are a very powerful magnet. One who nurtures intense and confident desires attracts things that will help them. People, objects, circumstances, and environments, as long as they desire them with hope, confidence, security, and serenity. Similarly, one who fears something generally tends to trigger forces that will bring about exactly what they fear. In reality, one who fears is actually expecting what they dread, and in the eyes of the law it is the same as if they truly desired it. The law works in both cases. The principle is the same. The best way to overcome the habit of fear is to adopt the mental attitude of courage. For the best way to dispel darkness is to let in the light. Struggling against a negative thought tendency by recognizing its strength and trying to deny it through intense efforts is a waste of time. The best, safest, easiest, and quickest method is to assume the existence of the desired positive thought in its place and consistently dwell in that positive thought. Therefore, instead of repeating, "I am not scared," one must forcefully say, "I am filled with courage, I am brave." One must reaffirm, "I have nothing to fear," because even though it has the nature of a negation, it simply denies the reality of the object causing the fear. Instead of admitting one's own fear and then negating it to overcome fear, one must firmly cling to the mental attitude of courage. One must think of courage, say the word courage, and act with courage. One must keep the mental image of courage before them at all times until it becomes a normal mental attitude. One must firmly hold the ideal before them, and gradually they will achieve its realization. The ideal will manifest. Let the word courage deeply penetrate your mind and firmly hold it there until your mind retains it where it should be. Think of yourself as someone courageous. Consider that you act with courage in delicate situations. Understand that there is nothing to fear, that worry and fear have never helped and will never help anyone. Understand that fear paralyzes effort and courage encourages activity. The confident, daring, and enthusiastic human being who says, "I can do it and I will," is a very powerful magnet. It attracts exactly what it needs to succeed. Things seem to come their way, and people say they are lucky. Nonsense. Luck has nothing to do with it. Everything lies in the mental attitude, and the mental attitude of the human being who says, "I can't" or "I am afraid," also determines the degree of success. There is no mystery. One just has to look around to understand the truth of what I just said. Have you ever met someone lucky who lacks the deeply rooted thought, "I can do it, and I will"? They will always be surpassed by the person who says, "I can't." Even if the latter may have more skill and ability, the first mental attitude brings out latent qualities on the surface in addition to attracting help from the outside, whereas the second mental attitude not only attracts people and things that I cannot do, but also prevents that human being from manifesting their own powers. I have proven the truth of these opinions, as have many others, and the number of people aware of this is increasing day by day. Don't waste your thought force. Use it profitably. Stop attracting failure, misfortune, disharmony, sorrows. Start now and emit a current of bright, positive, and joyful thoughts. Let your main thought be, "I can do it, and I will." Think, "I can do it, and I will." Dream, "I can do it, and I will." Say, "I can do it, and I will." I can do it, and I will. Live on the plane of "I can do it, and I will." And before you know it, you will feel the new vibrations manifesting in action. You will perceive them giving results. You will be aware of a new viewpoint. You will understand that you belong when you join the legion of I can do it, and I will. You will feel better, act better, see better, and be better in every way. Fear is the father of worry, hatred, jealousies, malice, anger, discontent, failure, and everything else. The person who frees themselves from fear will discover that the rest of the pack disappears. The only way to be free is to get rid of fear, to uproot it entirely. I consider conquering fear as the most crucial step for those who want to master the application of the power of thought. As long as fear dominates you, you will not be able to progress in the realm of thought, and I must insist that you start working right away to rid yourself of this obstacle. You can do it if you set your mind to it with determination, and once you rid yourself of this weakness, life will seem entirely different to you. You'll feel happier, freer, stronger, and more positive, and you'll have more success in all your life endeavors. Start today. Decide that this intruder must vanish. Make no compromises with it. Insist on its complete surrender. It may seem like a daunting task at first, but each time you confront it, you weaken it, and you become stronger. Stop feeding it, starve it, for it cannot survive in an atmosphere of courageous thoughts. So start filling your mind with brave, good, and intense thoughts. Occupy yourself with thoughts of bravery, and fear will die by itself. Courage is positive, fear is negative, and you can be sure that the positive will prevail while fear lurks with its maybe, its suppose, its I am afraid, and all its other cowardly suggestions. You won't be able to use all your thought force to its fullest until you have removed it from your life. Once you've cast it aside, you can navigate without hindrances, and every inch of your sails will catch the wind. Fear is a Jonah, so throw it overboard. The whale that swallows it has all my sympathy. I recommend you start doing some of the activities you could accomplish if you weren't afraid to try. Begin working with them while continually affirming courage, and you'll be surprised to find that a changed mental attitude will clear obstacles from your path, making things much easier than you could imagine. Exercises of this kind will develop and reward you much more by seeing the results of such a simple practice. You have many things ahead of you waiting to be accomplished, things you could master by simply shaking off the yoke of fear, by merely refusing to accept its suggestions, by boldly affirming the self and its power. And the best way to conquer fear is to strengthen courage and stop thinking about fear. In this way, you'll train the mind into new habits of thought, eradicating the old negative thoughts that have held you down and repressed you. Carry with you the word courage as if it were your motto and manifest it in action. Remember that the only thing to fear is fear itself, and there is not even a fear of fear, for as much as it is a coward, it will flee if you confront it. Chapter 6. The Transmutation of Negative Thought. Worry is the offspring of fear. Thus, if you put an end to fear, worry will starve to death. This advice is ancient, yet still worth repeating, because it's a lesson we must keep in mind at all times. Some people believe that if we kill fear and worry, we will never accomplish anything. I have read editorials in prominent newspapers where writers argue that without worry, one can never achieve any of life's great tasks, as it is necessary to stimulate interest. That's utter nonsense, no matter who says it. Worry has never helped anyone accomplish anything. Instead, it stands as an obstacle in the path of achievement. The underlying motive for action and accomplishment is desire and interest. If one ardently desires something, they are highly interested in its attainment and are ready to seize any opportunity that might aid in getting what they want. Furthermore, our mind begins working at the subconscious level, bringing forth many valuable and important ideas into the field of consciousness. Desire and interest are the causes of success. Worry is not desire. It's true that when the environment becomes intolerable, one may be driven by despair to make efforts that will result in eliminating the undesirable conditions and acquiring others more in harmony with their desire. But this is merely another form of desire. The person desires something different from what they have, and when this desire becomes intense enough, their attention is wholly turned towards its realization. They undertake a powerful effort for change. However, it is not worry that caused this effort. Worry might content itself with lamenting and saying, "I am unhappy," exhausting the nerves without obtaining anything. Desire acts differently. It intensifies when a person's conditions become unbearable. And finally, when that person feels the pain so intensely that they cannot bear it any longer, they say, "I can't bear it anymore. I will change." And that's what they do. Then desire comes into action. The person continues to desire a change in the worst way, which is also the best way. And when their interest and attention focus on the task of liberation, things begin to move. Worry never succeeds in anything. Worry is negative and fatal. Desire and ambition are positive and life-giving. A person can worry endlessly and yet accomplish nothing. But let that person transmute their worry and discontent into desire and interest, believing that they are capable of bringing about change. The idea, "I can do it, and I will," then becomes the beginning of events. If fear and worry must vanish before we can achieve great things, we must expel these negative intruders and replace them with confidence and hope. Transmute worry into intense desire. Then you'll discover that your interest awakens, and you'll start thinking about things that interest you. Thoughts will emanate from the great reserve accumulated in your mind, and you'll start manifesting them into action. In harmony with similar thoughts of others, you'll attract help and assistance from the vast volume of thought waves that fill the world. You attract thought waves corresponding to the dominant thoughts in your own mind. Your mental attitude also sets in motion the great law of attraction, through which you attract others who might aid you, and you are yourself attracted to others whom you might assist. This law of attraction is not a joke, nor a metaphysical nonsense, but an important living and active principle of nature, as anyone can ascertain through experimentation and observation. To succeed in something you strongly desire, that desire must be evident to attract it. One with weak desires attracts little. The more intense the desire, the greater the force put forth. You must want something intensely before you can obtain it. You must desire it more than anything else and be willing to pay the required price. The price is getting rid of certain minor desires that hinder the realization of the most intense desire. Comforts, conveniences, amusements, pleasures, and many other things must vanish, although it all depends on what you want. Generally, the more you desire something, the higher the price to be paid. Nature believes in adequate compensation, but if you truly desire something with such ardor, you'll pay the price without a murmur, for your desire will lessen the importance of other things. You say you intensely desire something and do everything in your power to obtain it. It comes naturally. You desire it as much as a prisoner desires freedom, as much as a dying person desires life. Look at the nearly miraculous things accomplished by prisoners who desired freedom. Look at how they strove to traverse metal plates and stone walls with very simple tools. Is your desire so intense? Are you striving to get what you want, as if your life depended on it? It's ridiculous. You don't know what desire is. Let me tell you, I'm a person who desires something as fervently as a prisoner desires freedom, or as a very vital person desires life. This person can overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The key to achieving this is desire, confidence, and willpower. This key opens many doors. Fear paralyzes desire. It scares life. You must rid yourself of fear. There have been moments in my life where fear took hold of me, seizing my vitality, where I lost all hope, interest, ambition, and desire. But thanks to the Lord, I've always managed to rid myself of the grip of that monster and face my difficulties like a man. And behold, things started to become easier. Sometimes the difficulty vanished, or I was given the means to overcome it, avoid it, or work around it. It's strange how all this works. No matter the size of the difficulty, when we face it with courage and self-confidence, it seems that we straighten up afterward, and we wonder who or what we were so afraid of. This is not just a fancy, but the operational mode of a powerful law that we do not fully understand, but can manifest at any time. There are people who often ask, "It's all well and good that you followers of the New Thought say don't worry." But what can a person do when they think about all the obstacles that could block their path and disrupt their plans? Well, all I can say is that such a person is making a mistake, worrying about problems that might arise in the future. Most things we worry about never come to pass. A large proportion of the rest show up in a milder form than expected, and there are always other circumstances that arise simultaneously to help us overcome the problem. The future doesn't only hold difficulties to overcome, but also agents that will aid us in overcoming those difficulties. Things fall into place on their own. We are prepared to face any problem that arises, and when the opportunity presents itself, we always find a way to confront them. God doesn't just temper the wind for the shorn lamb, but he also tempers the shorn lamb for the wind. The winds and shearing usually don't happen at the same time. There's usually enough time for the lamb to acclimate, and then it regrows its wool before the cold sets in. It has been said, and with much reason, that 9/10 of our worries concern things that never happen, and the remaining 10th concerns things of little or no importance. So why expend all your reserve forces fretting about future problems? It's better to wait to worry when problems actually arise. You'll find that by accumulating this energy, you'll be capable of facing any kind of adversity that emerges. What consumes all the energy in normal human beings is the actual resolution of difficulties or concern about supposed problems. We're always in tomorrow, and this tomorrow doesn't turn out as terrible as we had imagined. Tomorrow is all right. It contains both good and problematic aspects. When I think about all those things I once feared would outlast me, I can't help but laugh. Where are they now? I don't know, and I've almost completely forgotten that I once feared them. There's no need to fight worry, as that's not the way to overcome this habit. Just practice concentration, then learn to focus on something right in front of you, and you'll find that the worrying thought evaporates. There are better ways to overcome unwanted thoughts than fighting them. Learn to concentrate on thoughts of the opposite nature, and you'll have resolved the issue. When the mind is filled with worrying thoughts, it can't find the time to develop plans that would benefit you. But when you focus on bright and useful thoughts, you'll find that it begins working subconsciously. When the opportunity arises, you'll discover all sorts of plans and methods to handle the demands that arise in your path. Maintain a correct mental attitude, and everything will fall into place. Worrying is futile. It has never solved anything and will never solve anything. Bright, joyous, and happy thoughts attract bright, joyous, and happy things, while worry repels them. Cultivate the right mental attitude. Chapter 7. The Law of Mental Control. Your thoughts are either faithful servants or tyrannical masters, depending on what you allow them to be. You have the power. So choose. Either they will work under the direction of a strong will, doing everything they can, not only during waking hours but also when you sleep. Some of our best mental operations occur when our conscious mentality is at rest, as evidenced by the fact that in the morning we find that worrisome problems seem to have been solved overnight, after we've chased them from our minds, at least seemingly, or they will take over and will become their slaves if we are foolish enough to permit them. Over half of the world's population is a slave to any erratic thought that has the power to torment. You've been given your mind to use wisely, not to be dominated by it. There are very few people who seem to know this and understand the art of controlling the mind. The key to this mystery is concentration. A little practice would develop in all human beings the power to use the mental machinery properly. When you have a mental task to perform, focus on it to the exclusion of everything else, and you'll find the mind converging on that task, and everything resolves quickly. There's no friction, and all superfluous movement or waste of energy is avoided. All available energies are utilized, and every rotation of the mental steering wheel has a purpose. It's worth being a competent mental engineer. The individual who knows how to direct their mental engine knows that one of the most important things is the ability to stop once the task is completed. They cease stoking the boiler and maintaining high pressure once their job is done, or when the daily part of the work is finished. They know to shut down the boilers until the next day. Some people act as if the engine must continue running continuously, whether there's something to do or not, and then complain about the wear and tear and necessary repairs. Mental engines are formidable machines, and what they need is good, intelligent care. For those familiar with the laws of mental control, it would seem absurd to stay awake all night, worrying about the day's problems or, more often, the problems of tomorrow. Slowing down the mind is as easy as slowing down an engine, and thousands of people are learning to do this today through the new mode of thinking. The best way to achieve it is to think of something else, as different as possible from the intrusive thought. It's futile to fight an unacceptable thought in an attempt to smother it. That's a great waste of energy. The more you say, "I won't think about that," the more that thought returns because you keep it in front of you to strike it down. Let it go. Don't think about it anymore. Focus on something entirely different and maintain your attention there through an act of will. A little practice would work wonders in this area. Attention can focus only on one thing at a time, so direct all your attention to one thought and the others will fade away. Try it, and you'll see. Chapter 8. Reaffirming Vital Force. I have already spoken about the benefits of getting rid of fear. Now I would like to infuse life into you. Many of you have lived as if they were, dead without ambition, energy, vitality, interest, or life. Thus we won't go anywhere. You stagnate. Wake up and manifest some life. This isn't a place where you can behave like a zombie. It's a place for fully awake, active, living people. And what we need here is a good general awakening. Even that would require at least a resounding blast from Gabriel's trumpet. It seems that alone would awaken some people who think they are alive but, in reality, are dead to everything that makes life worth living. We must allow life to flow within us and express itself naturally. You must not let the daily trivialities or the big ones depress you and drain your vitality. Reaffirm the vital force within you and manifest it in all your thoughts, deeds, and actions, and before you know it, you will be joyful and full of vitality and energy. Bring life into your work, into your pleasures, within yourself. Stop doing things halfway and start taking an interest in what you do, say, and think. It's amazing how ordinary things in life can become interesting just by being awake. We are surrounded by interesting things happening every moment, but we won't be aware of them unless we reaffirm our vital force and start being truly alive instead of simply existing. No man or woman has ever been anything unless life is infused into daily tasks, actions, and thoughts. What the world needs is living men and women. Just look into the eyes of those you know to discover how many of them are truly alive. Most lack that expression of conscious life that distinguishes one who lives from one who merely exists. I want you to acquire that sense of conscious life so you can manifest it in your life and demonstrate what mental science has done for you. I wish for you to get to work today and start transforming yourself according to the latest pattern. You can achieve it if you put the appropriate interest in affirmation and exercise. Focus your mind on the thought that your inner self is much more alive and that you're fully manifesting life, both mentally and physically. Keep that thought there, aiding yourself with constant repetitions of the directive. Don't let that thought escape, and always bring it back to the center of your mind. Keep it before your mind's eye as much as possible. Repeat the directive when you wake in the morning and when you go to bed at night. Repeat it at mealtime and as often as possible throughout the day, at least once every hour. Form a mental image of yourself full of life and energy as often as possible. When you start a task, repeat, "I am alive," and infuse as much life as possible into the task. If you feel a bit down, say, "I am alive." Then take a few deep breaths, and with each inhalation, let your mind maintain the thought that you're breathing in strength and life. And as you exhale, hold the thought that you're releasing all the old dead and negative states you'd like to get rid of. Finish then with an ardent and vigorous affirmation, "I am alive," and say it seriously. Allow your thoughts to materialize into action. Don't just repeat that you're alive, but you must demonstrate it through your actions. Take an interest in doing things. Don't just daydream or live in a trance, get into it and live. Chapter 9. Training the Mind in Habit. Professor William James, a famous psychology professor and writer, said quite rightly that the most important thing in all education is to transform our nervous system into an ally rather than an enemy. For this, we must make all useful actions habitual and automatic as soon as possible and avoid with great care anything that could be harmful. When acquiring a new habit or abandoning an old one, it is necessary to throw oneself into it with as intense and determined an initiative as possible. Allow no exceptions until the new habit is firmly established in life. Don't miss the first opportunity to act on all the resolutions you make and any emotional drive you feel toward the habits you aspire to incorporate. This advice will be familiar to all students of mental sciences, as it addresses the issue much more simply than any of us. It emphasizes the importance of transferring to the confines of the subconscious mind the proper impulses so that they become automatic and second nature. Our subconscious mentality is a large repository of all sorts of suggestions, coming from ourselves as well as from others. As it is the mind of habit, we must be careful and send it the right material from which to create habits. If we accustom ourselves to performing certain activities, we can be sure that our subconscious mentality will facilitate the accomplishment of these many times over, making it easier each time until finally we are firmly bound by the ropes and ties of habit and custom, sometimes making it more or less difficult, even almost impossible, to break free from this detestable thing. We must cultivate good habits to be ready when it's time to put them into practice. There will come a time when we must give our best efforts, and it depends on us now that, when the need arises, we are ready to act automatically and almost instinctively, without even thinking or struggle to break free from what is opposed to what we desire at that moment. We must remain vigilant at all times to avoid the formation of bad habits. What may seem harmless today, or perhaps even tomorrow, could prove very harmful if it became a particular habit. If you were in a situation where you had to answer the question, which of these two things should be the better response? The answer would be, I will do what I would like to become a habit for me. When shaping a new habit or breaking an old one, we must undertake this task with all the enthusiasm possible to gain as much ground as possible before the energy disperses when faced with the friction of opposing habits already formed. We must start by creating as intense an impression as possible in the subconscious, then constantly remain on guard against temptations to break the new resolution by saying, just this time. This idea of just this time cancels more good resolutions than any other cause. When yielding to just this time, a wedge is introduced that will eventually break the resolution. It is also very important to know that the more you resist temptation, the stronger your resolution becomes. Act on your resolution as early and as often as possible, because with every manifestation of thought in action, your resolution grows stronger each time you support it with an action. You reinforce the original resolution. The mind has been compared to a folded sheet of paper. From that moment on, it always tends to fold back onto the same fold unless we create a new fold that will be followed subsequently. These folds are habits, and every time we create one or form one, it becomes easier for the mind to fold onto these same folds. Therefore, we must have the right mental folds. Chapter 10. The Psychology of Emotion. It is possible to think of emotions independently of habits. We can easily consider acquiring habits of action and even thought, but we can also regard emotions as connected to feeling and quite distinct from intellectual effort. However, despite the distinction between the two, both are largely dependent on habit. Just as habits can be regulated in actions and perspectives, one can repress, increase, develop, and change their own emotions in the same manner. Psychology supports the axiom that emotions deepen through repetition. If a person allows a particular sensation to seize them, it becomes easier for them to succumb to that same emotion a second time, and so on, until that particular emotion or sensation becomes a habit for them. If an undesirable emotion seems inclined to settle permanently within you, it would be best to start working to get rid of it, or at least to master it. And the best time to do so is in the beginning, as each repetition further roots the habit, making it more challenging to rid oneself of it. Have you ever felt jealousy or envy? If so, you'll remember how insidious their initial appearance was. Subtly, they emitted hateful suggestions to your receptive ear, and gradually, with the continuity of these suggestions, you ended up seeing through the green prism of envy or jealousy. Envy affects bile and poisons the blood, which is why it's associated with the color green. You'll recall how it began to grow within you until you could hardly rid yourself of it. The next time, it will be easier for you to feel envy or jealousy. It seemed to attract all sorts of objects that seemed to justify your suspicions and sensations. Everything seemed green, this big green monster. The same goes for every sensation or emotion. If you give in to anger, it will be easier for you to feel anger the next time, even in the face of a minor provocation. There will come a moment when we must give our best efforts, and it depends on us now that, when the need arises, we are ready to act automatically and almost instinctively, without even thinking, or struggle to break free from what is opposed to what we desire at that moment. We must remain vigilant at all times to avoid the formation of bad habits. What may seem harmless today, or perhaps even tomorrow, could prove very harmful if it became a particular habit. If you were in the situation of having to answer the question, which of these two things should be the better response? The answer would be, I will do what I would like to become a habit for me. When shaping a new habit or breaking an old one, we must undertake this task with all the enthusiasm possible to gain as much ground as possible before the energy disperses when faced with the friction of opposing habits already formed. We must start by creating as intense an impression as possible in the subconscious, then constantly remain on guard against temptations to break the new resolution by saying, just this time. This idea of just this time cancels more good resolutions than any other cause. When yielding to just this time, a wedge is introduced that will eventually break the resolution. It is also very important to know that the more you resist temptation, the stronger your resolution becomes. Act on your resolution as early and as often as possible, because with every manifestation of thought in action, your resolution grows stronger each time you support it with an action. You reinforce the original resolution. The mind has been compared to a folded sheet of paper. From that moment on, it tends to fold back onto the same crease, unless we create a new fold that will be followed thereafter. These folds represent habits, and each time we create or form one, it becomes easier for the mind to fold onto those same creases. Therefore, we must have the right mental folds. Chapter 10. The Psychology of Emotion. It is possible to consider emotions independently of habits. We can easily consider acquiring habits of action and even thought, but we can also consider emotions as linked to feeling and quite distinct from intellectual effort. However, despite the distinction between the two, both largely depend on habit. One can suppress, increase, develop, and change their own emotions in the same way that habits can be regulated in actions and perspectives. Psychology supports the axiom that emotions deepen through repetition. If a person allows a particular sensation to take hold of them, it becomes easier for them to succumb to that same emotion a second time, and so on until that emotion or particular sensation becomes a habit for them. If an undesirable emotion seems inclined to settle permanently within you, it would be best to start working to get rid of it, or at least to master it. And the best time to do so is in the beginning, as each repetition further roots the habit, making it more challenging to rid oneself of it. Have you ever felt jealousy or envy? If so, you'll recall how insidious their initial appearance was. Subtly they emitted hateful suggestions to your receptive ear, and gradually, with the continuity of these suggestions, you ended up seeing through the green prism of envy or jealousy. Envy affects bile and poisons the blood, which is why it's associated with the color green. You'll remember how it began to grow within you until you could hardly rid yourself of it. The next time, it will be easier for you to feel envy or jealousy. It seemed to attract all sorts of objects that seemed to justify your suspicions and sensations. Everything seemed green, that big green monster. The same goes for every sensation or emotion. If you give in to anger, it will be easier for you to feel anger the next time, even in the face of a minor provocation. There will come a moment when we must exert our best efforts, and it depends on us now that when the need arises, we are ready to act automatically and almost instinctively, without even thinking about it, or to struggle to break free from what opposes what we desire at that moment. We must remain vigilant at all times to avoid the formation of bad habits. What may seem harmless today or even tomorrow could prove very harmful if it were to become a particular habit. If you found yourself in a situation where you had to answer the question, which of these two things should be the best response? The answer would be, I will do what I would like to become a habit for me. In shaping a new habit or breaking an old one, we must undertake this task with as much enthusiasm as possible to gain as much ground as possible before the energy dissipates when confronted with the friction of already formed opposing habits. We must start by creating as intense an impression as possible in the subconscious, then remain constantly on guard against the temptation to break the new resolution by saying, just this time. This idea of just this time cancels more good resolutions than any other cause. When you give in to just this time, you introduce a wedge that will eventually break the resolution. It is also very important to know that the more you resist temptation, the stronger your resolution becomes. Act on your resolution as early and as often as possible, because with each manifestation of thought into action, your resolution grows stronger. Each time you support it with action, you reinforce the original resolution. The mind has been compared to a folded sheet of paper. From that moment on, it always tends to fold back onto the same crease unless we create a new fold that will be followed thereafter. These folds represent habits, and each time we create or form one, it becomes easier for the mind to fold onto those same creases. Therefore, we must have the right mental folds. Chapter 10. The Psychology of Emotion. It is possible to consider emotions independently of habits. We can easily consider acquiring habits of action and even thought, but we can also consider emotions as linked to feeling and quite distinct from intellectual effort. However, despite the distinction between the two, both largely depend on habit. One can suppress, increase, develop, and change their own emotions in the same way that habits can be regulated in actions and perspectives. Psychology supports the axiom that emotions deepen through repetition. If a person allows a particular sensation to take hold of them, it becomes easier for them to succumb to that same emotion a second time, and so on, until that emotion or particular sensation becomes a habit for them. If an undesirable emotion seems inclined to settle permanently within you, it would be best to start working to get rid of it, or at least to master it. And the best time to do so is in the beginning, as each repetition further roots the habit, making it more challenging to rid oneself of it. Have you ever felt jealousy or envy? If so, you'll recall how insidious their initial appearance was. Subtly, they emitted hateful suggestions to your receptive ear, and gradually, with the continuity of these suggestions, you ended up seeing through the green prism of envy or jealousy. Envy affects bile and poisons the blood, which is why it's associated with the color green. You'll remember how it began to grow within you until you could hardly rid yourself of it. The next time, it will be easier for you to feel envy or jealousy. It seemed to attract all sorts of objects that seemed to justify your suspicions and sensations. The habit of feeling and acting with pettiness does not take long to take root in a new environment whenever it is encouraged to do so. Worry is a great habit that tends to swell people. They start worrying about important things and end up doing it for trifles, so the least insignificance preoccupies and disturbs them. They imagine that all sorts of misfortunes are going to happen to them. If they undertake a journey, they are sure they will crash or sink. If they receive a telegram, it surely contains horrible news. If a child seems a little quiet, the worried mother thinks only of their sickness and death. If the husband seems pensive and preoccupied with his affairs, the good wife is convinced that he is beginning to stop loving her and bursts into tears. It's an endless story. Worry, worry, worry. And the more you indulge in it, the stronger the habit becomes. In no time, this continuous thought turns into action. Not only is the mind poisoned by these sad thoughts, but the forehead begins to show deep wrinkles between the brows, and the voice adopts that hoarse and plaintive tone so common among worried people. The mental state known as criticism is another emotion that grows with exercise. First, you find a flaw here, then in something else, and eventually in everything. The person becomes a chronic complainer, a burden to friends and family, someone strangers prefer to avoid. Women can become great complainers, not because men are better, but simply because a complaining man can rid himself of that habit thanks to other men who won't tolerate his nonsense. He realizes he's only making his situation worse and gets rid of the habit, while a woman is more likely to stay in it because this constant grumbling is just a matter of habit. It is born and grows from a small seed. Each time you indulge in it, it takes root, a branch or tendril, rooting itself more and more in the one who provides the ground for it to grow. Envy, lack of generosity, or gossiping are habits of this kind. The seeds are dormant in each of us and only need good ground and a little water to grow strong and powerful. Every time you give in to these negative emotions, it becomes easier for you to fall back into them or into others similar. Sometimes, encouraging an unworthy emotion creates the conditions for the development of an entire family of these mental weeds. However, this is not an orthodox preaching against sin or bad thoughts. It is simply to draw your attention to the law underlying the psychology of emotion. It is not a novelty. It is as old as the world, but many of us have forgotten it. If you want to constantly manifest these unpleasant and ungrateful traits and suffer from the unhappiness they bring, do not deprive yourself of it. It's your business and your right. It's not my business, and I'm not preaching to you because I already have enough to do in monitoring my own unwanted habits and actions. I'm simply talking to you about the law that governs the matter, and the rest depends on you. If you want to eliminate these habits, know that you have several ways to do so. For example, every time you catch yourself abandoning a negative thought or feeling, seize them firmly and firmly tell them, "Get out of here." At first, it won't be so easy and it might startle them, raise their hackles and growl like an offended cat. But don't worry, just say, "Disappear." The next time they won't be as confident and aggressive but will show a little fear. Every time you suppress or stifle a tendency like this, it becomes weaker and you become stronger. As Professor James says, refuse to express a passion and it will die. Count the days before expressing your anger, and it will seem ridiculous to do so. Whistling to gather courage is not just a mere figure of speech. On the other hand, sitting all day in a downcast posture, sighing and responding to everything with a mournful voice, and you can be sure that your melancholy will not disappear. There is no more valuable precept in moral education than this, as confirmed by all those who have experienced it. If we want to overcome emotional tendencies within ourselves, we must first diligently and dispassionately devote ourselves to practicing the opposite dispositions that we would prefer to cultivate. Relax your forehead, brighten your gaze, contract the back muscles instead of those in the abdomen, speak in a louder voice and give a compliment. Your heart must be truly cold if all this doesn't begin to thaw. Chapter 11. Developing new brain cells. I have spoken of the plan to rid ourselves of these undesirable sensitive states and expel them. But there is a better method, which is to cultivate the sensation or emotion directly opposed to the one we wish to eradicate. We are very capable of considering ourselves as the result of our emotions and sensations and believing that these sensations and emotions are ourselves. However, this is far from being the case. It is true that most of humanity is a slave to its emotions and sensations, that it is strongly dominated by them. Individuals believe that sensations are elements that direct them and cannot be freed from. They stop rebelling and yield to these sensations without any doubt, even if they may know that the emotion or mental trait is calculated to hurt them and provoke unhappiness and failure instead of happiness and success. They say to themselves, "We are made this way," and believe it. The new psychology teaches people better things. It tells them that they are the owners of their emotions and sensations rather than their slaves. It teaches them that they can develop brain cells that will manifest desirable tendencies, and that the old brain cells that manifested so unpleasantly can be added to the list of things to be removed, letting them atrophy due to lack of use. People can transform themselves and change their entire nature. This is not a mere theory, but a palpable fact that thousands of individuals have taken care to demonstrate, and it is increasingly drawing humanity's attention. Regardless of the mental theory we uphold, We must admit that the brain is the organ and instrument of the mind, at least in our current state of existence, and that this is how we must regard the brain. It is like a wonderful musical instrument that has millions of keys with which we create countless combinations of sounds. We come into the world with certain tendencies, temperaments, and predispositions. We may attribute these tendencies to heredity or pre-existing theories, but the fact remains the same and does not change. Some keys seem to react more readily to our touch than others. Some notes seem to respond better to the passage of circumstances on the strings, and others vibrate less readily. However, we know that unless we make a voluntary effort to silence the sound of some of these strings that resonate so easily, it will be more difficult to make them sound, and they will not vibrate as easily with changing circumstances. And if we attend to some of the other keys that do not produce a clear note, we will soon tune them. Their notes will ring clear and vibrant, drowning out the less pleasant sounds. We have millions of brain cells that we do not use and that await our care. We are accustomed to dealing with some of them and work tirelessly with others. We can give certain cells a rest if we use others. The brain can seem trained and cultivated in an incredible manner for someone who has not paid attention to the matter. Mental attitudes can be acquired and cultivated, modified and discarded at will. There is no longer any excuse for people to manifest unpleasant or harmful mental states. We all have the remedy in our hands. We acquire habits of thought, feeling and action through their repeated use. We may be born with a tendency in a certain direction or acquire tendencies through suggestions from others, whether from readings, listening to teachers and masters. We are a mass of these mental habits. Every time we indulge in an undesirable thought or habit, it becomes easier for us to repeat that thought or action. Mental scientists have a habit of speaking of desirable thoughts or positive mental attitudes and undesirable or negative ones. There is good reason for this. The mind instinctively recognizes certain things as being good for the individual to whom they belong. It opens the way to these thoughts with the least possible resistance. They have a far greater impact than an undesirable thought, and one positive thought can neutralize several negative thoughts. The best way to overcome undesirable or negative thoughts, as well as feelings and emotions, is to cultivate positive thoughts. Positive thinking is the hardiest plant and, in time, it will eventually overpower the negative by withdrawing the necessary sustenance for its survival. Initially, the negative thought will offer vigorous resistance as it fights for survival, but as it is allowed to grow and develop towards positive thinking, it sees its end approaching, making things difficult for the person until they cease to feed it. Brain cells do not like to remain inactive, just like any other form of living energy. They rebel and struggle until they weaken to the point of not being able to continue. The best method is to ignore these mental weeds and devote as much time as possible to tending to the new and beautiful plants in the garden of the mind, taking care of them and nurturing them. For instance, if you tend to hate people, you can overcome this negative thought by cultivating love in its place. Think of love and manifest it as much as possible. Cultivate thoughts of goodwill and act as kindly as you can towards all those with whom you come into contact. Initially, it will not be easy for you, but gradually, love will prevail over hatred until it begins to decline and wither. If you tend towards sadness, cultivate a smile and a joyful outlook on things. Insist that the corners of your lips turn upwards and adopt an attitude that sees the brighter side of things. The demons of sadness will surely revolt, but pay them no attention and continue to cultivate optimism and joy. Let your motto be bright, joyful, and happy, and try to stick to it. These recipes may seem old and worn, but they are psychological truths that you can use to your advantage. If you understand the nature of this matter once, you will comprehend and benefit from affirmations and self-suggestions from several schools. By using this method, you can become energetic instead of being discouraged, active instead of being lazy. Those from the new school of thought often have much to say about thought control, and indeed, it is necessary to control thought to achieve results, but something more is needed. You must manifest the thought until it becomes a habit within you. Thoughts take shape in action and manifestation, and in turn, actions influence them. Thus, By manifesting certain ways of seeing things, actions act upon the mind by enhancing the development of the part of the mind closely linked to that act. Whenever the mind regards a thought as easier, the resulting action becomes easier, and whenever an action is performed more easily, it becomes easier to harbor the corresponding thought. Thus, you see that action and reaction work in both directions. If you feel joyful and happy, it is entirely natural for you to laugh. If you laugh a little, you will begin to feel bright and joyful. Do you understand what I mean? Let me explain it in a few words. If you wish to cultivate a certain habit or action, start by cultivating the corresponding mental attitude. And to cultivate that mental attitude, begin by manifesting or performing the act that aligns with the thought. Now see if you can apply this rule. Attend to something that you feel you must do but do not want to do. Cultivate the thought leading to that attitude and tell yourself, I love doing this and that. Then perform the movement joyfully. Remember and manifest the thought that you want to take care of this task. Get interested in doing it. Study the best way to do it. Think about it seriously, and you will see how you will do it with a lot of pleasure and interest. Thus you will cultivate a new habit. If you wish to try this with a mental trait you wish to get rid of, the process works in the same way. Start by cultivating the opposite trait. Think about it and manifest it with all your heart. Then observe the change that will occur. Do not be discouraged by the resistance you will encounter at the beginning, but joyfully tell yourself that you can do it and you will succeed. Strive to maintain joy and interest in the process. If you achieve this, the rest will be child's play. Chapter 12. The Power of Attraction. The Force of Desire. We have already seen the need to rid yourself of fear so that your desire can work with the greatest possible force. Assuming you have succeeded in mastering that part of the task, or at least begun moving along the path to that mastery, I will now draw your attention to another important related issue. I will refer to the matter of mental leaks. No, I'm not talking about leaks stemming from your failure to keep your own secrets, although that is important, but it's part of another matter. The leak I am referring to is caused by the mind being drawn and distracted by any fancy or whim. To succeed in obtaining something, it is necessary for your mind to fall in love with it and be aware of its existence, almost to the detriment of everything else. You must become infatuated with what you desire, in the same way as if you were to marry the woman or man of your dreams. I'm not saying you should become monomaniacal about the subject and lose all interest in anything else in this world. That would not work, because the mind needs diversion and change. What I am saying is that you must focus so much on the object of your desire that everything else seems secondary. A man in love can be very pleasant to everyone, perform his duties, and enjoy life's pleasures with good humor, but inwardly, all he says to himself is, "For me, there is only one girl," and all his actions are directed towards winning that girl and creating a comfortable home for her. Do you understand what I mean? You must fall in love with what you desire, and you must be passionate to the very core. Not the kind of superficial love that changes from day to day, but rather that ancient love that prevented a young man from going to bed without taking a stroll near his girlfriend's house to make sure the building was still there. Likewise, the man or woman seeking success must turn that desired thing into their primary passion. They must focus their mind on the grand opportunity, on the optimal chance. Success demands your entire love, and if you start flirting with other carnival profits, it will soon turn its back on you. If a man strays from his primary interest, he will eventually become a loser. Mental strength works best when it is focused. You must devote all available forces to what you desire, in the same way as a man in love constantly plans ways to please his beloved. Similarly, one who is in love with their work or business will do the same, and the result will be that 100 plans will manifest in the field of consciousness, many of them being of great importance. The mind operates in the subconscious realm, remember, and almost always based on the dominant passion or desire. It will arrange things, compose plans and projects that will arise in your consciousness when you need them most, and you will want to cry out in joy as if you had received great external help. But if you dissipate your thought force, your subconscious mind will not know how to satisfy you, and the result will be that you will not notice this source of help and assistance. Furthermore, you will be unaware of the powerful result of concentrating thought in the conscious elaboration of your plan's details. Moreover, the being whose mind is full of a dozen interests will fail to exert the attracting power manifested by one who has only one guiding passion, and they will fail to attract the people, things, and results that could aid them in achieving their plans. They will also fail to enter into the current of attraction that would put them in touch with those who would be delighted to help by sharing interests. I have noticed in my own affairs that when I allow any external distraction to divert me from my usual work routine, it doesn't take long before my affairs start showing obvious signs of lack of vitality. Some might say the cause is that I would have left some unresolved matters, things I should have simply done had I focused my mind on them. That's true, but I've also observed similar outcomes in cases where there was nothing to do, cases where the seed was sown and the harvest just had to ripen. And in those cases, as soon as I directed my thought to the issue, the seed started to sprout. I am not suggesting that I had to emit a great deal of mental waves to influence other people. By no means. I simply began to realize that I had something very beneficial that interested many other people, and I was delighted that everyone could have access to it. My mind seemed to revitalize the work, and the seeds began to bear fruit. This is not a fantasy. Because I have experienced this repeatedly, I have discussed this topic with many individuals and found that our experiences align perfectly. Therefore, one should not fall into the habit of allowing these mental leaks. Keep the desire fresh and active. Let it accomplish its task without interference from opposing desires. Remain in love with what you aim to achieve. Nourish your imagination with it. Consider it as granted, but do not lose interest. Keep your attention on your primary interest and maintain your dominant passion strong and vigorous. Do not be a mental polygamist. Human beings only need a mental love. That is, have your desires one by one. Some scientists have claimed that a kind of love underlies all life. They argue that a plant's love for water prompts it to extend its roots to find the beloved object. They say that a flower's love for the sun draws it away from dark places to receive light. Chemical affinities are actually a form of love, and desire is a manifestation of this love for universal life. Therefore, I am not simply making a metaphor when I tell you that you must love what you wish to obtain. Nothing but intense love will enable you to overcome the numerous obstacles that will arise in your path. Only this love will enable you to bear the heavy trials of this task. The more you desire something, the more you will love it, and the more you love it, the more intense will be the force of attraction towards its achievement, both within you and outside. Thus, love one thing at a time. Do not be a mental Mormon. Chapter 13. The Great Dynamic Forces. You have already seen the difference between triumphant and strong men in any field of life and the failures and weak ones around them. You are aware of the differences that characterize these two categories, but it's a bit difficult for you to express what these differences consist of. Let's examine the issue a bit, said Burton. The more I live, the more I am certain that the great difference between human beings, the weak and the powerful, the important and the insignificant, lies in energy and in unwavering determination. Establishing a goal and setting out to achieve it, to life, to death, this quality will accomplish all that is possible to accomplish in this world, and no talent, circumstances, or opportunities will transform a bipedal creature into a man if it lacks this energy and unwavering determination. Both will surpass powerful barriers and the greatest obstacles. However, they must be used together. Energy without determination is wasted. Many human beings have energy, so much that they overflow with it, yet for some reason, they seem incapable of progressing. They squander their energies. Now they get excited about one thing, then another. They engage in matters of no significant interest and squander their energy and nerve force to aid them in their efforts. But when it's all done, they've achieved nothing. Others, having much energy, fail to direct their will towards the desired goal. Unwavering determination, that's the words. Don't you tremble at their power? If you have something to do, get to work and do it. Gather your energy and then guide it and direct it with your will. Infuse it with that unwavering determination, and you will get what you want. Everyone has a gigantic will within themselves, but most of us are too lazy to use it. We cannot encourage ourselves enough to sincerely say, "I will accomplish it." If we could arm ourselves with courage to that point and then hold on to it so that it doesn't slip away from us, we could seize this marvelous power, human will. Man has only a slight idea of the power of will, but those who have studied occult teachings know that the will is one of the great dynamic forces of the universe, and if used and directed properly, it can accomplish things almost miraculous. Energy and unwavering determination. These are not just words. Engrave them in your memory, imprint them in the wax of your mind, as if they were a seal, so they become a constant inspiration to you in your times of need. If you could make these words vibrate within you, you would be a giant among pygmies. Repeat them again and again, and you will see how you feel full of new life. You will see how your blood circulates, how your nerves tingle. Make these words a part of yourself, then return renewed to the battle of life, invigorated and strengthened. Put them into practice. Energy and unwavering determination. Let that become the slogan of your daily life. And you will be one of the few individuals capable of accomplishing a lot. Many people are suppressed and do not give their best because they underestimate themselves in comparison to those who succeed in life, or rather, they overestimate those who succeed by comparing themselves to them. One of the most curious things that those who have been in contact with successful people can perceive is that these successful individuals are not extraordinary. When you meet a significant writer, you feel somewhat disappointed realizing that they are someone very normal. They do not have a brilliant conversation, and in fact, you encounter many ordinary people who seem much brighter than that person who dazzled you with the light of their books. You know a great statesman, and they do not seem to be half as wise as many elderly people in your village who waste their wisdom by tossing it into the air. You meet an industrial magnate, and they do not give you the impression of having the insight of some retail traders in your neighborhood. How is that possible? Is the fame of these personalities fictional, or what is the real issue? The real question is this. You imagine that these people were made of superior material, and you're disappointed to discover that they are made of the same stuff as you and those around you. But you wonder where the greatness of their achievements resides, especially in believing in themselves and their inherent power, in their ability to focus on the task at hand when they work, and in their capacity to avoid energy leaks when they're not working. They believe in themselves and ensure that every effort yields a result. The wise individuals in your village waste their wisdom by speaking to many fools, when, if they were truly wise, they would conserve that wisdom and place it where it would be useful. The brilliant writer does not waste their genius. In fact, they close the cupboard where they store their genius and only open it when they're ready to focus and work. The industrial magnate does not seek to impress you with their ingenuity and intelligence. They never did, even when their colleagues were constantly talking and boasting. This future successful financier remained silent. The significant people in the world, that is, those who have succeeded, are not much different from you or me or the rest of us. Fundamentally, we are all very similar. You only need to get to know them to realize how ordinary they are. But do not forget the fact that they know how to use the material they have at their disposal, while the rest do not know or even doubt they have it. The man or woman who succeeds generally starts by realizing that they are not so different after all from the triumphant people often talked about. This gives them confidence, and they find that they are capable of doing things. They then learn to keep their mouths shut and avoid wasting and dissipating their energy. They store the energy and focus it on what they are doing, while their peers dissipate their energy in all directions, trying to show people how brilliant they are. The successful man or woman prefers to wait for the approval that follows achievements and cares very little for the praises surrounding promises of what they hope to do someday or for making a demonstration of sadness without results. One reason people in contact with successful individuals manifest success themselves is that they are able to observe the winners and understand the trick of their greatness. They realize that the winner is a normal person, but one who completely believes in themselves and does not waste energy, but conserves all their strengths for tasks worth it. And by following this example, they begin to put into practice the lessons learned in their own lives. What is the morale of this discussion? Simply do not underestimate yourself, nor overestimate others. Understand that you are made of good material, and that within your mind there are many good things. Then get to work and develop them. Make something good out of this good material. Get it by paying attention to what is in front of you and giving your best to each, knowing that there are many other good things in you that will help you in everything that comes before you. Dedicate the best of yourself to the task at hand, and do not cheat in the present task for the sake of another that might seem to be on the horizon. Your supply is endless. Do not waste your good material on the multitude of onlookers, spectators, and critics around you watching what you do. Keep your good material for your task, and do not be in a hurry to receive applause. Keep your good thoughts for copying if you are a writer. Keep your good plans for implementation if you are in business. Keep your wisdom for when the occasion demands it if you are a statesman. And in all cases, avoid the desire to show your cards to the crowd of curious people looking for a free show to entertain themselves. There is nothing noble in this teaching, but it is precisely what many of you need. Stop behaving foolishly and take things seriously. Stop wasting what is good in you and start working on something worthwhile. Chapter 14. Claim what is yours. In a recent conversation, I was telling a woman to gather the courage to pursue something good that had been within her for many years and that finally seemed within reach. I told her that it seemed her desire was about to be fulfilled, that the law of attraction was bringing it to her, but the woman lacked faith and kept repeating, "It seems too good to be true, too good for me." She had not surpassed the stage of feeling like a worm crawling in the dust, and even though the promised land was within her reach, she refused to enter because it was too good for her. I think I managed to persuade her to take a step forward, because the last thing I knew was that she is in the process of taking possession of it. But I didn't want to talk to you about that. I wanted to draw your attention to the fact that there is nothing too good for you, as great as it may seem, as unworthy as you may appear. You are entitled to everything that is best, for it is your rightful heritage. So, do not be afraid to ask, demand, and take the good things from the world. They are not the prey of any favored child. They belong to all, but they only approach those who are wise enough to recognize that they rightfully belong to them and who have the courage to seek them. Many magnificent things are lost because no one asks for them. They are wasted, remain out of your reach because you feel unworthy of them. They elude you because you lack confidence and courage to claim and take possession of them. No one except the brave deserves beauty, says the old adage, and this is true in every aspect of human effort. If you keep repeating to yourself that you are unworthy of something good, that it is too good for you, the law might take you at your word and end up believing what you say. This is a characteristic of the law. If you believe what you say, it takes you seriously. So, be careful what you say, for it will believe you. Affirm that you deserve the best, that there is nothing too good for you, and it is very likely that the law will take you seriously and say, "I think he's right. I'll give him everything he wants. He knows his rights. So why not do it?" But if you keep affirming that it is too good for you, the law might say, "I'm not sure if that's the case, but he will. It's certain that he knows it, and it won't be up to me to contradict him." Why would there be something too good for you? Have you ever thought about what you are? You are a manifestation of the whole, and you are perfectly entitled to everything that exists, or if you prefer, you are the child of the infinite and the heir of everything. You speak the truth in both ways. Whatever you ask for, you're only claiming what is rightfully yours. The more you insist on asking for it, the more confident you are that you will receive it. The more you strive to reach it, the closer you will be to getting it. Intense desire, confident expectation, courage in action, that is what eventually provides you with what is yours. But before setting these forces in motion, you must realize that you are only asking for what is rightfully yours. If the slightest doubt remains in your mind about your right to what you desire, you create resistance to the operation of the law. You can ask as vigorously as you want, but you will lack the courage to take action if there is an ounce of doubt about your right to get what you want. If you continue to regard what you desire as belonging to somewhere other than yourself. You will adopt the position of the envious, the greedy, or even that of a thief. In this case, your mind rebels and will not want to continue its task because it instinctively feels repelled by the idea of taking what does not belong to it, as the mind is honest. But when you understand that the best of the universe belongs to you as a divine heir, and that there is enough for all without you having to take from anyone, then all friction disappears, and the law does its work. I don't believe in humility. This humble and modest attitude doesn't attract me. It makes no sense to turn these attitudes into a virtue when a human being is the heir of the universe and has the right to everything necessary for their growth, happiness, and satisfaction. It seems absurd to me. I'm not saying one should adopt a boastful and arrogant attitude. That would be absurd too. True strength doesn't come from showing off. The braggart is a weak individual. They brag to hide their weakness. The truly strong person is calm, tranquil, and carries within them the consciousness of strength that make his boasting and alleged strength unnecessary. But one must turn away from this hypnosis of humility, this submissive and modest mental attitude. Remember the terrible example of Uriah Heep and beware of imitating it. Raise your head and face the world. There's nothing to fear. The world might also fear you and say, be a man or woman, not an object that groans. And this applies to your mental attitude as well as your external behavior. Put an end to this crawling, verminous mental attitude. Stand tall and look at life without fear. Gradually you will become your ideal. Nothing is too good for you. Absolutely nothing. The best of the best isn't even good enough for you, because there are much better things ahead of you. The best gift the world can give you is just a trifle compared to the great things awaiting you in the cosmos. So fear nothing. Go after all of it, after the trifles of this plane of consciousness. Pursue them, grab a handful, play with them until you're satisfied. They are there for our exclusive use, not to be looked at from a distance, but to be played with if we so desire. Indulge yourself. There are heaps of these toys waiting for your wishes and requests. Don't be shy. I don't want to hear any more nonsense about things being too good for you. You're like the emperor's child who thought the tin soldiers and the toy drum were too good for him and refused to take them. But children aren't always like that. Instinctively, they recognize that nothing is too good for them. They want everything in front of them to play with and seem to feel entitled to all things. And that's the mindset that seekers engaged in divine adventure must cultivate. Unless we are like little children, we cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Everything we see around us are toys in God's nursery, toys we use in our games. Help yourself. Ask for as much as you can from the without a care. Use them all. They're all yours. And if you don't see what you desire, just ask, because there's a great reserve available on the shelves and in the cupboards. Play, play, and play to your heart's content. Learn to weave mats, build houses with bricks, assemble. Play wholeheartedly, play well, and ask for all the materials you need to play. Don't be afraid, as there's enough for everyone. But remember that even though all this is true, the best things are just objects to play with. Toys, bricks, mats, cubes, and others are very useful for learning enjoyable lessons, very enjoyable to play with, and desirable for all these purposes. Have fun, and make the most of all these things. Dive into the game fully and enjoy it. It's good to do so. But you must remember something. You should never forget that all these good things are just toys, a part of the game, and you must be ready to set them aside when it's time to move to the next class, to change courses, and not cry or complain because you have to leave the toys behind. Don't get attached to them, because even though they are there for your use and pleasure, they are not part of you. They are not essential to your happiness in the next stage. Don't despise them for their lack of reality. They are wonderful things, relatively wonderful, and you can enjoy them as much as you want. Don't be a spiritual bigot by refusing to participate in the game, but also don't get attached to toys that are good to be used and played with, but not good enough to use you and turn you into a toy. Don't let the toys reverse the roles. There's a difference between being master of circumstances and being their slave. The slave believes the toys are real and that they're not good enough to deserve them. They only take a few because they're afraid to ask for more and miss out on most of the grace and pleasure. Then, by considering the toys as real and not realizing that there are many more, they get attached to those that come their way, thus becoming their slave, fearing to lose them and not daring to crawl on the ground to find others. The master knows they can ask for anything. They ask for what they need day after day, and don't worry about overburdening themselves, knowing there's much more and no one can deprive them of that. They play, and they do it well. They have fun playing, and while playing they learn their lessons from the nursery, but they don't get too attached to the toys. They're ready to set aside the old toys and reach out for new ones. And when told they have to move to the next class, they leave behind the toys used that day, and with bright eyes and a confident mental attitude, step into the new classroom, into the great unknown, with a smile on their face. They're not afraid because they hear the teacher's voice and know they're waiting there in the big next classroom. Chapter 15, Law Not by Chance. Some time ago I spoke with a man about the power of thought attraction. He told me he didn't believe that thought could attract anything to him, and that it was all a matter of luck. He said he had discovered that misfortune relentlessly pursued him, and that everything he touched always went wrong. It had always been that way, and it always would be. He had gotten used to it. When he undertook something new, he already knew it would end badly, and that he wouldn't benefit from it, at least not for himself. In the theory of thought attraction, there was nothing true. It was all about luck. This man didn't realize that by confessing like this, he was precisely offering a very convincing argument in favor of the law of attraction. He testified that he always expected everything to go wrong, and it always ended up happening. What he had was a magnificent illustration of the law of attraction, but he didn't know it, and there was no argument that could convince him. He was opposed, and there was no way to change his mind. He always waited for misfortune, and on every occasion he was right. Yet for him the position of mental science was absurd. Many people seem to believe that the only way the law of attraction operates is when one intensely and continuously desires something. They don't seem to realize that intense belief is as effective as intense desire. The successful person believes in themselves and their ultimate success, and without paying attention to minor setbacks, adversities, stumbles and falls, they rush enthusiastically toward their goal, always convinced that they will reach it. Their opinions and goals may change along the way, or their plans may be changed, but deep down in their heart, they know they will ultimately achieve their goal. They don't constantly wish to be able to do it, they simply feel it, believe it, and thus set in motion the most powerful forces known in the world of thought. The man who continually believes he will fail will surely end up failing. How could it be otherwise? It's no mystery. Everything he does, thinks and says is tinged with the thought of failure. There are others who catch this spirit, and consequently, they don't trust themselves or their abilities, thinking of these as manifestations of their misfortune instead of attributing them to their beliefs and expectations of failure. They spend all their time suggesting thoughts of failure and invariably suffer the effects of self-suggestion. Thus, through their negative thoughts, they block that part of their mind from which ideas and plans should emerge, leading them to success, something accessible to those who await success because they believe in it. Bright ideas don't come to us in a state of discouragement. Our minds work on ideas we can use only when we are enthusiastic and hopeful. Humans instinctively feel the atmosphere of failure that hangs over some of their peers, and on the other hand, they recognize something in others that leads them to say, when they learn they've encountered a temporary obstacle, they'll get through it. They can't be sunk. This is about the atmosphere provoked by the predominant mental attitude. Cleanse your mental atmosphere. Chance doesn't exist. The law governs everything everywhere by virtue of its own way of operating. It's not possible to name a single thing that has happened without reason. Try to analyze the matter to its ultimate consequences, and you'll find that everything is the result of the law, as evident as mathematics, planning and purpose, cause and effect. From the movements of worlds to the growth of a mustard seed, everything is the result of the law. The fall of a rock on the side of a mountain doesn't happen by chance, but due to forces that have been at work for centuries to bring it about, and behind these causes, There are other causes until reaching the uncaused cause. Life isn't the fruit of chance but of the law. The law operates at full speed, whether you believe in it or not. You can be the ignorant object on which the law operates, or you can align yourself with the operations of the law, immerse yourself in its current, so to speak. And from there, life will seem very different to you. You cannot escape the law by saying you have nothing to do with it. You have every right and freedom to oppose it and produce as much misery as you want. But that doesn't affect the law, and you can continue until you learn the lesson. The law of thought attraction is one of the names of the law, or rather one of its manifestations. I repeat, your thoughts are real things. They emanate from you in all directions, combining with other similar thoughts, with opposing thoughts of a different character, forming combinations, heading where they are attracted, moving away from centers of opposing thoughts. Your thought attracts thoughts that others have consciously or unconsciously emitted, but it attracts only those that are in harmony with yours in the world of thought. Similar ones attract each other and opposites repel. If you tune your thought to the tone of courage, confidence, strength and success, you will attract thoughts of a similar nature, people of a similar nature, and things that resonate with that mental melody. Your mood or predominant thought determines what is attracted to you. Choose your mental companions. Today you set in motion currents of thought that will attract over time other thoughts, people and conditions in harmony with the predominant tone of your thought. Your thought will blend with that of other similar minds, and you will be drawn to each other. And undoubtedly, sooner or later, you will unite in a common purpose, unless one or the other changes the course of their thoughts. Accept the operations of the law, integrate it within yourself. Immerse yourself in its current, maintain your composure, tune your thought to the key of courage, confidence and success. Stay in touch with all such thoughts that continuously emanate from hundreds of minds. Make the most of what you can find in the world of thought, because the best is there. So don't settle for less. Establish relations with good minds. Follow the appropriate vibrations. You must be tired of constantly being shaken by the operations of the law, so harmonize with it. Thank you very much for your visit.